Hi everyone. I took this step 2 exam exactly a week ago today, and I want to share some wisdom about the exam. I want to give you guys some tips and hopefully help you guys do the best you can on this exam. Okay, so the first point that I want to make is that the questions were, I thought they were pretty fair. I didn't think they were too different from the MBMEs. I didn't think the stems were any longer. I didn't think the things being asked were any different. I thought overall it was a really fair exam. I don't, I've heard a lot of things about, oh, like, what the fuck was that exam? This is too different from what I've seen. And I think the main reason why people feel like that is because usually when you do an MBME exam or a UWorld question set, you get to see the answers at the end and you have this moment of, oh, this all makes sense. But when you're writing the exam, because you don't see the answers at the end, it gives people a sense of, oh, this exam was different than what I'm used to. But as someone who's done probably like 12,000 questions cumulatively for this exam, I can tell you that these questions weren't that different from the MBME, from UWorld. They weren't similar to AMBOSS really, but I don't think the AMBOSS question bank for step 2 is as strong as the question bank for its step 1. Okay, so don't get anxious, just do a load of MBMEs, do a lot of UWorld, and you should be in a good place. The other point that I want to make is that there was a lot of quality improvement on this exam. I wouldn't say there was a lot of ethics. I thought that that's how much ethics I was expecting, but a lot of quality improvement. So make sure you know your quality improvement pretty well. This is as a part of the recent changes they made. I think they started making these changes in 2020 or actually 2022. But now it's in full swing, and there was a lot of quality improvement on the actual exam. And some of the older MBMEs aren't representative of this. Um, and that's why I think a lot of people get caught because they don't see a lot of quality improvement questions. The other thing that I find surprising was that there was a lot of the chart style questions, the questions that are like, oh, this person age is like 60, chief complaint, stomachache for 2 weeks, and then it gives you a whole chart. I honestly didn't find it any different than an actual written question. If anything, they are, I think, more straightforward. When it comes to those, I would pay special attention to what the question is asking you and the presentation, the patient's complaint, and the HPI. Actually, I think a lot of times it has the answer for you, or it helps you answer it much more easily. Okay. The other point that I want to make is that Divine's lectures were really, really helpful. He has a lot of lectures, so there's not enough time to watch everything. There's not enough time to watch even a third of his lectures. But I think there's lectures that are super high yield or podcasts that are super high yield, and there's podcasts that are not super high yield. I have a kind of list of what's what I call must watches that I'll kind of put a link to them in the description. I think those are the ones that you must watch. I personally didn't watch all of them, but I'll give you a life hack. There is an Anki deck that someone out in the Reddit has made like cards for the lectures. So I'll also put a link to that Reddit post. What I did is that for the must watch lectures, I looked at their Anki cards. I picked the ones that weren't familiar to me and I added them to my kind of Anki cards that I was doing maybe 3, 4 times, 3, 4 days a week. So I still went through the concepts in those lectures pretty well without having to actually listen to the lecture. And also, I would argue that seeing it in Anki repetitively is way more effective than hearing it once in a lecture. So I'll put a link down to the must-watch list of Divine's podcasts, in addition to a link to the um, Reddit post that someone made a deck of all of the not all of but a lot of Divine's podcasts in the description. Okay, so check those out. Um, Next point is that I would do U World, MBMEs, and actually, so don't make it overcomplicated. Just do U World, just do MBME. You should be ready by the end of it. Just make sure you read the explanations. The extra caveat that I want to give you here is that the free 120s are super important. But if you have time, do the free 120 for step three. Okay, the questions aren't really much harder, honestly. If you they might be a little different, but what you'll find is that I did it on my very last day, and I did it without untimed. It was an extra bit of like information, but it worked in a sense of it got me familiar to an actual set of USMLE questions right before I go write the actual exam. So it just puts you right back into the proper mindset of doing MBME questions. I think that's really important. Like, don't do UWorld 3 days before your exam because you'll be in a slightly different mindset. So try to keep some MBME questions for the last few days. And if you run out of those MBME questions, you can use the step three questions. I wish I did more step three questions for this exam, to be honest, because I feel like there's a lot of overlap. Um, and I think instead of doing like my wrongs or whatever, or doing extra amboss, I wish I did step three MBMEs because I really didn't think they're any different than the step two MBMEs, except that they were just harder step two MBMEs. Uh, okay, so if you're in your core rotations currently, and if you're looking into, oh, how can I like study better, and how can I prepare myself better for step two, the best thing you can do other than studying well is that do a bunch of cumulative questions, you world, anything really, a couple times a week. You know, set aside 2 hours over a weekend to just do some cumulative questions. You can do this 6 months before your exam. It will go a long way because when you're doing each shelf, you're really getting good at OB-GYN, let's say. But if you're writing the shelf almost a year before your exam, you almost have to go back and relearn a lot of OB-GYN. But if you're doing even a little bit of cumulative questions every week, you kind of keep that a lot more fresh compared to you if you just forget about OB-GYN, go about the rest of your course, and then come back to OB-GYN 6 weeks before your exam. Okay, so I wish I did that. This is not something I did. I really wish I did that. It would have made my prep a lot easier. Okay, I would say that about 8 weeks before your exam, so 2 months before your exam, whether you're in rotations or whether you're in your dedicated, start uh, making an anki deck that you add everything you get wrong, every concept you find challenging to that anki deck. This is the same anki deck that I used to add whatever I didn't know from Divine's lectures into. And I did those cards probably 3, 4 days a week, not every day, because you're not really trying to learn these concepts from the ground up. You're just trying to keep them fresh in your mind. And honestly, you're just trying to keep them fresh in your mind until the exam. Uh, yeah, so make sure you don't spend too much time doing this Anki. This is just to make sure you don't make the same mistake over and over, and for you to identify what areas you have weaknesses for. So if you get to those questions, you answer them a little bit more extra carefully than you would have otherwise. Uh, okay. So the other tip is that I want you to do the quality improvement article from Amboss. It's a lengthy article, but do that article, read it really carefully. It would have given me maybe two more questions, three more questions. That's not a little, actually. There are a lot of questions on the actual exam from that article, but if I have reviewed it right before the exam, it would have probably helped me with an additional 2 to 4 questions, I would say. Just because quality improvement is not natural to us as medical students, it's not something that we study for a long time. I took a look at that article once. It wasn't enough. There were questions on the exam that I remembered seeing the concepts for, but I didn't really know what the answers were, so I ended up guessing. So quality improvement is really important. There's an article called Challenging Clinical Scenarios. It's kind of like ethics situations. like the questions with quotations and stuff like that. Like patient does this, what do you say? I found that article pretty useful. It has about like 40, 50 clinical scenarios that are will cover most of the stuff that the MVMEs are going to throw at you. I don't remember particularly anything from my exam, but um, yeah, I don't remember anything particular. I don't remember if there were a lot of clinical scenarios or not. But that article is really helpful in terms of trying to get you to know everything that they can throw at you. Okay. All right. Then my last point is that make sure you do a lot of stamina practices. So like do a whole, do multiple days of 9 hour exams. Uh, you can do MBMEs back to back. You can do an MBME and two CMS forms. I wish I did a little bit more of that, a little bit more of stamina building, but overall, I would say I have a high stamina naturally. I wish I did a little more of that. Overall, it's a very straightforward exam. It's not, you can't, if you don't give yourself enough time to prep, I guess it will be challenging, and I don't know how you would go about it. But if you have 4 or 5 weeks of um, prep time dedicated, you should be fine. Honestly, during my dedicated, I wasn't even going 100% because I just felt like if I didn't have enough mental toughness to be going like 14, 16, 12 hours a day. I was probably going like 8 hours a day studying on most days. But even that was enough. So yeah, these are my you know tips. Now, granted, I haven't seen my results yet, but I was pretty happy uh, with my like self assessments. Um, yeah, if you have any questions, put it down in the description or in the comment section. The other thing I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to offer free tutoring to people via this channel. So I'm also gonna put a link down in the description. I'm gonna have like a couple hours free over Saturdays mornings or something like that, New York time, and I will kind of like make people book a certain time to get tutored, and this is for me just to give back to the community. All right. Okay. Ciao.